Should we make a start? Hi, good evening, everybody. Hi, good evening, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you just indicate by just unmuting yourselves for a few seconds to let me know you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can.
Loud and clear.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Right. My name is Koji Fagade. I am part of NSF UK. We have today NSF UK's food hygiene training. Now, this training is being organized by NSF to help us give people information about food safety in general, and it's being facilitated today by Bosola Joseph. Bosola is a food safety expert, and she has loads of experience in that area. I'll just run through very quickly what today's program would look like. Just bear with me 1 second. Right, so invariably what we'll start with, just bear with me a second. All right, where are we now? All right, we'll start with this. Right, it will give us a bit of introduction to food safety law, rules of food safety, food poisoning and causes. We'll have a case study, and then afterwards we'll have a question and answer session. I'll leave Bosola to do the rest. Bosola, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me? Oh, well, I hope you
can. Loud and clear.
Great. So I'm going to start off this evening. I'm going to try and keep it within a reasonable amount of time, because I know it's a Sunday evening and there's nothing like getting back to your home environments. So food safety training for event organizers, and I'd like to emphasize on that point. It's for most of you who have the opportunity or the privilege to organize events. Next slide, please. So by the end of the session, hopefully you should have an understanding of the basic food hygiene and safety law, the need to implement suitable measures to control food safety at the event you organize. I'm going to talk about food poisoning, its causes, and how hopefully we should prevent it. And in that part, I haven't put it on the objective, we'll cover things on areas like allergens and allergen control, and then obviously due diligence, what you as an organizer has in place to guard against an outbreak of food poisoning. Next slide, please. So what is food safety law all about? The key thing, it is to protect the consumers, the likes of you and me. Is to protect honest traders from unscrupulous ones. There's so many dishonest traders, people who put dye in palm oil, people who mix alcohol with methyl oxide. Food safety law is also about food must comply with food law. It's about making food safe for everybody to eat, and anybody who handles food has a duty to keep food safe, and that includes the likes of you and me. Next slide, please. Now, food safety law, especially for the area of food hygiene and safety, that's what I am going to channel this training on. Food hygiene and safety at the moment, we're using the retained EU legislation and our local legislation, and there's a lot. And food safety law will cover things like food standards, which talks about labeling and claims and packaging and contaminants and colors. It covers areas like allergen control, and it also covers areas like contaminants. You know, a few years ago, Nigerian beans were banned on the market, and that's because of the legislation that was in place. Sometimes our palm oil is banned because we use the wrong color, and even our melon seed because of a contaminant, and that's down to poor harvesting and poor processing in Lagos. Next slide, please. Now, the food safety law is enforced by the likes of myself. I'm an environmental health practitioner, or we also have other officers, authorized officers who have specialist knowledge in a science-based factor. So we could be a microbiologist, a biochemist. But before anybody can actually enforce food safety law, there has to be specific qualifications. Not anybody can just do that. And what do? We can go in at any reasonable time to inspect a food premises. Nobody can stop us. And I can tell you, we have more powers than police in that aspect, because sometimes to gain access to a premises, the police might need our assistance to gain access to that premises. We can stop and inspect food delivery vehicles anywhere, whether it's a mobile trader or a stationary trader. We can interview anybody at any time. We can take photographs, we can take samples of food, and we can also observe workplace activities. So the likes of when you're having an event, a food safety officer can come in, talk to your staff without even talking to the managers. So you shouldn't feel offended when things like this happen. Next slide, please. We can look at documentation, including computer records. We can take computer records away. And I remember years ago where we had a case where there was a situation where there was horse meat in burgers, and all we had to do was to go into that premises, seize all their computers and retrieve information, what we needed. We can ask for assistance from any employee to support any investigation. We can seize, we can detain food, anything we consider unfit for human consumption, it can be taken away from the premises. We serve notices, and what everybody doesn't like to hear, we can actually prohibit a business from operating. So yes, we have the powers to close a business down. Next slide, please. Now, failure to comply with food safety law, as I said, a business can be closed. You can be fined up to £20,000. And that is £20,000 for each offense. So you might not have hot water. You may cause a bout of food poisoning. You may not have the structure in place. You may have contaminated food. Each fine could be up to £20,000. And you can also be put in prison. Next, please. Next slide, please. So today we're going to talk about how do we actually get to manage food safety, managing food hygiene. I've always called it the 4 C's plus P. So one thing important, we consider cleaning, cooking, chilling, which will cover the cold store, which could be your fridges and your freezers, cross-contamination, and personal hygiene. Now, we'll talk about cleaning, but I'm going to touch on cross-contamination because this is one of the biggest problems that we have. Wearing gloves at an event, people scratching their hair, picking their nose, putting their hands in a bowl of salad, and then serving somebody. These are issues of cross-contamination, and it's very, very important that we should be able to manage food hygiene and safety. Could I have the next slide, please? Now, when I was thinking about what we're going to do for this organization, I thought we should put together some golden rules. So wherever you are, whether you're from Queen's College or Regan or Methodist Girls High School or Igbubi College, you would have a set of rules in place. The first golden rule, when you employ a caterer, make sure they are registered with the local authority. Now, registration is free. Nobody can be denied registration. Any person who has been registered will be listed on the Food Standard Agency's website. The Food Standard Agency gives the officers, we are responsible for giving food hygiene ratings. Now, if a business has not been inspected, if you go on the Food Standard Agency's website, they will be listed as awaiting inspection. Always check the provider. There are a few exceptions to the rule, but I would believe it would be better safe than sorry for you to have a registered caterer. Now, when a caterer is registered and they get a food hygiene rating score, it's nothing to do with how tasty the food is. It's based on 3 criteria. One of them relates to the hygiene. Now, when an inspector goes in and visits, they will look at the general practices that are taking place. So from my point of view, if I go in and I find somebody, and I'm sorry, I don't want you can laugh, it's got body odor. that to me, that means, oh God, well, there might be a few problems with this person's personal hygiene. If they've got BO, what else is happening? Or I see somebody with dirty fingernails, or I see somebody with grubby hair. Hygiene, or you find somebody with gloves and they just taken something out of the bin. That will reflect on the rating which you get at the end of the inspection. The structure is another criteria which goes towards the food hygiene rating. The structure is the physical structure and the cleanliness of the premises. So if you have a dirty floor and an inspector visits you, that may affect your rating. But I can reassure you, there's a difference between dirt from yesterday, dirt from last year, and dirt from 3 months ago. And the last thing is about the management. Management are the records which you have to keep on site in your business. The records could mean your cleaning rotas, your temperature records, your invoices, your training records, your allergen listings, any record, so that when a visit is made by anybody, you have things in place to show that you are managing food hygiene and you're managing your food safety. Next one. Number 2, as event organizers, I want you to get to know the venue. So you're going to use a venue for an event. Try and go to the venue. Try and find out the size of the venue. You can't expect to cater for 500 people and you rely on your caterer to, let me rephrase that. You have an event for 500 people and you look at the size of the kitchen and you're going to employ caterers or caterers to cater in a kitchen the size of a box room. It's not going to help. You're going to have cross-contamination. It's going to be chaotic. Things are going to be on the floor. So get to know the size of the kitchen, the preparation area and the servery area. Get to find out what hand washing facilities are available. By law, you have to have separate facilities for hand washing purposes. You do not wash your hands in the same sink that you're going to use for washing the vegetables, which people are going to eat. You don't do it. You need to have arrangements for washing food and equipment. Now, some venues might only have one sink. If you have one sink in place, you need to have adequate cleaning chemicals for you to be able to clean in between operations to guard against cross-contamination and the unfortunate occurrence of a food poisoning outbreak happening. You need to have sufficient food preparation and working surfaces. Now, I'm sure a lot of you would know that we have color-coded chopping boards. We have a red chopping board for raw meat and a green chopping board for your vegetables and a brown chopping board for something. I want to reassure there's no law in place for you to use any specific color, but just know that you don't want to see somebody chopping raw meat on a red chopping board, and then the same person is cutting cucumber on the same red chopping board. Have enough work surfaces. I've been to places, I go to parties, my daughter tells me off, stop wearing your hat everywhere. I walk into a party and the whole place is chaotic. And was it last year? I went to America. I forgot I was in America. I put my hand on my head. I thought, oh my God, what's going on here? And I started organizing them in the kitchen because there was pepper soup on the floor. Somebody was chopping onions. It was just chaotic. You need to have proper and adequate facilities and work surfaces. And if you haven't got enough, take a table in, put covering on it, and provide adequate facilities. You need enough place for cold storage for your fridge and your freezer. If you don't have enough fridges and freezers, go and buy some packs of ice. Use your cool boxes. Keep things chilled. Keep things cold. Please keep rubbish. Keep places set aside for your rubbish. Have enough sacks, black sacks, and don't use the same sacks for putting them in your cool boxes and put your jollof rice in your cool boxes in your black sacks. Black sacks have a black dye, which is not food, which is non-food, it's not food grade, and it should be used solely for refuse collection. Have enough bags, have enough bins, and make sure you have hot water. We have prosecuted businesses without having hot water. You can't wash your hands without hot water. You can't clean properly without hot water. And if you haven't got a supply of hot water in the tap, make sure you have an urn or kettles available. I remember going to a wedding of my cousin 5 years ago. I saw the caterer, and I'm going to mention the name of this venue. It was Bacon College in Bermondsey. I went in there. They allowed caterers to hire the venue, and they didn't give them access to the kitchen. So what people were doing, they had used water and they'd put it in their cool boxes. Now, I was queuing up for food, and I thought, oh God. And I went to, I said, we're not in Abeokuta. I'm sorry for anybody from Abeokuta here. My mother comes from Abeokuta. Maybe that's why I used it. I said, we're not from Abeokuta. Why are you doing this? They said they didn't have access to the water. Why did you pay to use a venue when the venue did not allow you to have access to the water? I refused to eat from any of the plates they had washed. I asked for a paper plate, and I'm glad I did that, because my cousin who came in from America, they didn't sleep that night. They had the runs, they had diarrhea, and they had vomiting. And a number of people who went to that wedding suffered with diarrhea and vomiting. But it was obvious there was no hot water, there were no facilities in the place. So don't shy away from demanding hot water and other facilities whenever a venue is hired out. Could I have the next slide, please? Record keeping. This demonstrates that processes and things are being followed. It will highlight any areas that need to be improved. So if you keep records or of anything, if anything's gone wrong 3 weeks ago and it's happening again, you think, okay, what happened 3 weeks? Why hasn't there been a change now? It just prevents things happening in the first place. Or what kind of records do you like keeping? Temperature control, and don't falsify records. I remember going to a premises once and I thought, oh God, this is really good. All your temperature records are great. But it happened to be the same temperature throughout the day. In the morning, it was 4 degrees. In the afternoon, it was 4 degrees. In the evening, it was 4 degrees. But at some time throughout the day, your fridge and your freezer is going to be open. So there is going to be a fluctuation in temperatures. I only walked out, took the temperature, and it was 11 degrees. Don't falsify, do not falsify records, because if anything goes wrong and you're taken to court, those records will not stand up in court, and your defense, the prosecutor, they will rip you apart. Now, I'm going to emphasize the importance of record keeping, especially at events. And I'll talk about the temperature of, I'll talk about the temperature of hot food later on. Okay, keep records of the quantities of meals you've produced. How many covers of jollof rice did you have? How much fish did you cook? How much chicken did you cook? How many salads were sold? It's always good, because in an unfortunate instance, when a food poisoning happens, the records are there for keeping. You're being duly diligent. It shows that you've put in a lot of effort to control what you are doing. Keep contact details of all your food handlers, whether it's your auntie's child or your uncle's nephew or an agent staff. Take the records, because if anything does happen, you can always go back. Sometimes there are people who look healthy, but they are called what we call asymptomatic. We carry bacteria which can cause a problem. But unless, and I've always used an example, when you're driving and then you look in the mirror and somebody's picking their nose. Now, just imagine that person now comes out and gives you a high five. You now take that and buy a piece of, get a piece of meat.
I'm getting worried.
And eat the piece of meat.
Special assistant.
Get a piece. I think I'm not,
Russell jet to London Heathrow.
London.
Yeah.
It's delayed.
Can you mute yourself?
5 minutes.
So, but they would special assistance will come for me.
Yes, I will.
can I
Okay.
just ask people?
I come here.
Okay.
Can
Okay.
the host mute everybody, please?
Sorry about that. It's happened. That's a human nature in all of us. Yeah. So I was saying about picking noses, and then people would now touch that food and you now eat that food. Now, the gund from somebody else's nose has now come onto you. It wouldn't cause them a problem, but you've consumed that food. And that is why it's important to have the contact details. Some people are in contact with somebody else who's had a viral infection, somebody else who's suffered food poisoning. They've got no problem. And it's very common amongst nursing mothers, where their children, they've probably changed nappies, they've washed hands, but they may, through no fault of their own, carry that unsafe bacteria in them, and then it's transferred into food. So keep details. So if there's an unlikely problem, you're able to eliminate and narrow your search down to certain numbers of people. And the last thing I talked about, they keep records, calibration records. You might keep temperatures of the hot food and the cold food, but if your thermometer isn't working properly, you may be keeping falsified records. So you calibrate and it's very simple. Hot water boils at 100 degrees and ice is 0 degrees, but keep records. Training. Training is very, very important. This is a form of training. Not all food law says you have to be trained, instructed, or supervised. There is no law to say that you have to have any accredited course. Now, as a trainer, I would love the accredited course because I'm going to make money out of it. You can have an instruction. You can have a set of rules. You can be supervised. A lot of people sit on training courses. They get the piece of paper at the end of it, and it sits under the doormat in their homes. A lot of people have got certificates on the wall, and I ask a basic question. I would rather get information than to be impressed with a piece of paper saying they've got a level 1, level 2, or level 3 training course. Training could be induction training. And I think anytime you have an event, have an induction training. This is what you want us to do. Anybody that comes in, they wash their hands. If you have a policy on wearing gloves, put that in place and train people to. If I had my way, I would not allow gloves to be used at all, because gloves also get dirty and people forget that gloves are dirty and those gloves are used, and then it costs too much money. The hand wash basin is there, wash your hands. But if you are going to use gloves, have ongoing training on how you're going to use gloves, the frequency at which you're going to change the glove. Places like McDonald's, they have a bell, and when the bell goes off, everybody goes to wash their hands. Have something in place. Instruct. Don't shy away from instructing people what to do. Pick that up off the floor. Don't do that. Do this, do that, and always make sure you supervise. It's a legal requirement. Now I put FSM, that's your food safety management system. That is part of your training. Just don't have a massive book with policies and procedures and you're the only person that understands it. And when somebody comes in to ask question, you hear, oh, the manager isn't around, the boss isn't around, the person in charge isn't around. That information, put it into bite-sized chunks and pass that information to people you're actually working in. Training is powerful. Those who are Christians amongst us say, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Knowledge is very powerful and knowledge should be used. Nobody's above the law. So training is vital and training has to be done. Next slide, please. My golden rule number 5 is temperature control. Now, food can either be served hot or it can be served cold. There is nothing like serving food in between, except you follow this golden rule. So when you come to a venue, your food has to be served. It has to be hot. A lot of people use chafing dishes, and hot food has to be served at 63 degrees and above. Now, if you're going to allow that food to go below 63 degrees, it cannot go below for more than 2 hours. Earlier on, we talked about taking temperatures, and that is where record keeping is very important. It serves as your due diligence defense. So if you have an event and they're going to eat at 4 o'clock, don't come in, don't allow your caterers to come in with cold food at 3:30 and you expect that food to be hot enough for service. Make sure as organizers, the food is going to be hot. I think all schools, you can get cheap thermometers now. Go out and let somebody take a responsibility, maybe the welfare, the social secretary, if they're at the event, and just go around and just take the temperature of the food. Take it at random. If it's 70 degrees, fine. At least it wouldn't cool down. It wouldn't go below that temperature over the next 2 hours. But at least you know the food is hot enough. The same thing as cold food. Cold food can be served at 8 degrees and below. 8 degrees is the legal requirement. But for you to achieve that 8 degrees, the colder, the better. And you can keep cold food out of temperature control for no more than 4 hours. So those are very, very important time temperature. This slide's available. Anybody can have these slides afterwards. So these time temperature controlled are very, very important. And if any of you want to do an in-depth knowledge of food hygiene and trade, you get to know a little bit more about these. But please remember those, especially when you have hot holding or chafing dishes at any of your events. Now, there are different types of bacteria. Now, bacteria is just one of the things that can cause food poisoning. There's certain things that can cause food poisoning. Sometimes chemicals can cause food poisoning. Metals can cause food poisoning. A virus can cause food. Poisonous plants can. And sometimes your allergens can cause to have an adverse reaction. But there are many types of bacteria, but for food safety, we're going to talk about two specific types. We have what we call pathogenics. These are the harmful bacteria. These are the bacteria that will cause harm. Common ones are Salmonella, which we find in chicken, in eggs. Now, Salmonella can be found anywhere. Bacteria are very, very tiny things. You cannot see them with the naked eye, and you need to view them under the lens of a powerful microscope. So Salmonella, Staphylococcus aureus. Now, Staph aureus, as we call it, 40% of us have got this on our body. So it's in your nose, in your ears, on your fingers. It's all right if it's on you, that's no problem. But it's when you start picking your pimple and then you start handling food, you're transferring that toxin, that poison onto the food. And that's why it's very, very important to wash your hands or to change your gloves frequently and regularly. Another one is Bacillus cereus. Bacillus cereus, I call it B cereus because you remember B cereus. It's always associated with food poisoning and rice. Now, Bacillus cereus is what we call a spore form. It's a particular type of bacteria that, you know what, you throw heat at it, it will stand. You put it in the cold, it will stand. You put it in chemicals, it will stand. It's a very resistant bacteria, and it survives you find it's very common in rice. So because of that, you either serve rice hot or you serve rice cold. It's a spore former. There are other spore formers. I haven't written them down there. There's things like perfringens. They're different spore formers. And if anybody wants to know more about them, I'm always available. Then we have another one, Campylobacter. Campylobacter is another type of organism that can cause food poisoning, and it's found in the soil, it's found in meat. Now, pathogens, as I said, food looks normal, food tastes normal. So a lot of people, I always hear them say, oh, I tasted the food. I just knew there was something wrong with it. It caused food poisoning. No. If there's food poisoning, you wouldn't know. However, with spoilage bacteria, things perish. They either smell, they're either slimy, or there's discoloration. And the difference between pathogens and spoilage is that if anything looks off, why would anybody go and eat it? You don't need to go and eat. If it's smelling, don't eat it. Just throw it away. And so if anybody comes to your venue and the chicken looks funny, it looks discolored, please don't allow the caterer to serve it, because it's just off. You're not going to, it's best to throw it away than to eat it, and then there may be an upset stomach. But normally it's the pathogens rather than the spoilage organisms that causes the food poisoning. Next slide, believe. So what are the common dishes we have at our events? We have rice dishes. You have your jollof rice and your fried rice. You have your meat gizzard and your chicken and your fish stews, your salads, your moi moi, fried plantain. You've got your fried frog, you've got your puff puff, meat pies. They're all there. Now, I know that rice, by the time it's left the caterer, it will be piping hot. What happens between the caterer and when it comes to the venue? Does it come out of the pot and it goes into a cool, or what are these things called again? Ice box, insulated containers. Has the insulated container been washed properly? Has it just been wiped down? And when it's been cleaned with hot water and detergent, has it been turned upside down? Has it been dried with paper? Has it been dried with a cloth that hasn't been cleaned? The meat you're serving, where has it been? Your kitchen, you've got to cater for 40, 50, 60, 100 people, but the size of your kitchen is the size of a box room. So you can't do it. So you cook it the previous night. Where do you keep it overnight? Is it kept at the right temperature? Your salads and your sandwiches. Do you have somebody preparing your sandwich and they're eating at the same time? Or they're on the phone yakking. And then you've got saliva coming out, spreading over all the food. These are common foods served at events. They are prepared, most can be prepared properly, but the key thing is, what is the post-preparation handling? What has gone wrong after the food has been prepared? So these are the kind of things you need to ask yourselves. I've got a caterer, what could have gone wrong? Think about risk assessment, think about hazards, think about things you need to put in place to guard and to protect your consumers, your customers, your guests when they come to our events from suffering from any bouts of food poisoning. Next, please. Food poisoning. Normally in one of my training sessions, I would ask, has anybody had any bouts of food poisoning? And you'd hear so many funny stories. But it is caused by bacteria. And in this case, sorry, I'm talking about the bacteria of food poisoning. It's caused by bacteria multiplying. Now, bacteria need time, they need temperature, they need moisture before they start multiplying. So when you suffer from food poisoning, any bacteria you have consumed, each bacteria has their own incubation period. So from the time you consume the food to the time you suffer any symptoms, different bacteria have different times. Now, I mentioned Staphylococcus aureus earlier on. If you eat some food that has been contaminated with Staphylococcus aureus, the predominant symptoms are vomiting. So initially you will start vomiting, and it's within such a short period, within a few hours after eating contaminated food. Now, I'm not a medical professional, and I don't know whether a lot of people may respond differently, but as a general rule, you can't eat something at 1 o'clock and believe by 1:15 you're suffered from food poisoning. You may have there may be other issues, but because the bacteria needs time to adjust, and one bacteria multiplies every 20 minutes, and that is a general rule. So bacteria will continue to multiply. You will have abdominal cramps, severe cramps. Some people have said it seems as if a woman is in labor. So unfortunately, men, you may not understand that, but you will have severe stomach cramps, diarrhea. You just go to the toilet nonstop. Nausea, you may feel sick, but you're not sick. And the other one is vomiting. And sometimes it could be projectile vomiting. It's unfortunate that some of these symptoms could be fatal. And food poisoning, there are groups of people who are vulnerable. And a lot of us now, we're moving into that level. We're going into the 60s. So we're being classed as vulnerable people. So the young, the immunocompromised, those who have some form of medication or another, the pregnant people amongst us, and the elderly, we are more vulnerable and susceptible to food poisoning. So please, I don't pray it I don't pray it on anybody. It could lead to hospitalization. It could lead to kidney failure. And it's because you are losing a lot of liquid. So it puts a strain on the organ. So a golden tip, if you have suffered from bouts of diarrhea and vomiting, the first thing you need to consider is to replenish your liquid. So put a little bit of sugar and a little bit of salt, replenish the electrolytes and make a solution and just sip it gradually. Could I have the next slide, please? What causes food poisoning? I talked, food prepared too far in advance. You want to do an event, you use the wrong caterer, and they haven't got a large enough venue, or they haven't got a large enough kitchen to prepare the food. Can I just say, while I'm on this on this slide, there are a lot of dark kitchens. We call them dark kitchens nowadays, where you can actually hire a space. And they're all fully equipped. You can actually go and do any massive catering there instead of catering from some small venues. And then you can transport your food to a more reliable or a larger venue. Food prepared too far in advance. Don't prepare food. Don't use caterers. And that's why at the beginning I said the golden rule is to use registered caterers. They have got their risk rating, hopefully, and they've been scrutinized. Sometimes food is contaminated. The last one was a certain type of, like the egusi I mentioned. If your egusi is contaminated and you use your egusi, you can have chemical food poisoning. If your chicken is contaminated, luckily now the chickens are injected, so hopefully we have salmonella-free chickens. However, talking about chickens, one of the golden rules, and I don't crucify me, I'm just a messenger. They say, don't wash your chicken anymore. And why don't you wash your chicken? It's because sometimes when you're washing chicken, if they've still got salmonella in it, the water splashes all over the place. If you don't clean the environment where you've washed your chicken, then you tend to contaminate every other food within the vicinity. And if food is contaminated through that source and people consume it, then you're going to have food poisoning. Inadequate cooking, inadequate heat treatment. Whenever you're cooking, I know a lot of us are Nigerians, so we cook our food to death. We stir our food. When you're cooking and you're stirring food, you stir food once to distribute the heat amongst all the food. And secondly, you stir the food to stop food getting burnt. Unhygienic handling. Don't wash your hands, you're yakking, talking over the phone, saliva falls into the food, the pens fall into the food, all sorts of things fall into the food. I bought a samosa once. No, I didn't buy it. I was dealing with a complaint once where I had a samosa. Somebody brought a samosa, and while they were eating the samosa, they found a plaster in the samosa. Now the plaster was the same kind, you know. So when you think about it, a plaster in a samosa, oh God, it's horrible. It's an unhygienic handling. So that person knew they had a plaster on their finger. So when they noticed the plaster was missing, why did they not stop that food going out to the final consumption? To the final consumer. So unhygienic handling can cause food poisoning, and unsafe practices, cross-contamination. Cross-contamination is when bacteria comes from one source to a clean source. So if you use a dirty knife to chop a slice of cake, you are introducing bacteria from one source to another. If you're using a dirty cloth to wipe the table, that bacteria from that dirty cloth is being used to spread over the work surface, where you can then come and slice some moi moi, or you can put the puff puff, or you can put the chin chin. Sometimes you may use a container, you haven't washed it properly, you haven't rinsed it properly, there's still dirty water in it. Cross-contamination is one of the highest causes of food poisoning, and sometimes the use of leftover food. Now, earlier on I said bacteria need certain things to grow. They need temperature, they need time, and they need moisture. If you've left food out and you don't reheat it to high enough temperature, that food has gone through what we've gone, a high and a low of different temperatures, and the heat is there to destroy any bacteria apart from what we call the spore formers. But if you're going to use leftover food, please kill it to death, heat it to death before it's actually used. Next slide, please. Now, that is all about food poisoning. Then we've also got the foodborne disease, and this is also caused by bacteria and viruses, which is actually carried on the food. Again, there are symptoms. They are similar to food poisoning, which the food poisoning are abdominal pains, vomiting, and you're feeling sick. But when it's foodborne, then you have additional symptoms. You feel, sometimes it could be so bad, you could feel feverish. Sometimes people have rashes. Sometimes you just feel lethargic. You're actually tired, and sometimes the onset takes much shorter than what is responsible for food poisoning. So it could really take a number of days, and one is like I think Campylobacter. It can take up to 11 days before you actually come up with all these symptoms. These bacteria, they don't multiply on the food, but inside the person when they are when the food is actually eaten. Could I have the next slide, please?
Right, so, for a second, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Right. So just to let people know that obviously this whole thing is being recorded, and we also want to let people know that they will get a certificate of attendance for this course. So they could please leave their names and contact details in the chat. We'll get you a certificate at the end of it. Email your details if you want to info@nsf.uk, sorry, nsf.community, but I'll leave the details also in the chat as well. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's fine. Thank you. So as organizers, I'd like you all to, it can just be one and it can be spread. And I'm willing to help with the team to put this up. Get a due diligence checklist. Get a checklist in place so that across the board, you've done everything possible within your power to ensure that safe food, healthy food is available at your events. Always get the caterer's full details, including training records. As I've said earlier on, training doesn't have to be formal training, but it is good to have an accredited course. But you need to prove and to show that you know the basics. It could be an online course, it could be a webinar, it could be anything. Undertake any risk assessment. What risk have you done? What have you put into place? How is, as a caterer, what things have you thought about to ensure that the food you are serving to your guest is safe? And you must always make sure that anybody you're employing has a food safety management system. Let them come with their records. Ask them, what records do they have in place to show that they are providing and producing safe food? Keep a check of what time your caterer comes to the venue. What is the temperature of the food when it comes to the venue? You don't want food to come to a venue and you've taken the temperature and it's 48 degrees. Boy, why is it 48 degrees? Where has the food come from? What time did it leave? Where has it been? Have you been caught in any traffic jams? What time do you put the food into your chafing dishes? Your time, temperature combinations are very, very important. Again, I'm saying these are just your own due diligence checks. These are what you want to do as part of an organization. What cleaning chemicals do you have available? Do you have bleach, which I don't like on work surfaces, but it's on the floor. It can be used for the floor. Do you have detergent? Do you have adequate washing up liquid? And I don't like people using washing up liquid to wash their hands. Do you have antibacterial cleaners? Do you have sanitizers? There's so many cheap ones on the market now, but there's one, it's BSEN accredited. Once it conforms to that, that is fine. But when you're using antibacterial cleaners, please make sure you are familiar with the contact times. And use it even when you go, even you might use them in your homes. You buy a product, it's an antibacterial cleaner, and then it says spray, wait for 5 minutes. Who's going to wait for 5 minutes before they wipe a surface down? There are antibacterial cleaners with a shorter contact time, and they conform to BSCN 1276. So you need to have enough on site. You need to have sufficient cleaning cloths. I prefer businesses to use disposable cloths because then you can use them and you can dispose of them, or you can use J cloth so you have enough for the day. I do not like seeing cloths in piles all over the kitchen. You need bacteria need time, temperature, food, and moisture to grow. You've just used a cloth, it's got food on it, it's been left in a warm kitchen, it's got moisture, and then you now start cleaning, and then somebody cleans their hand. So have suitable and sufficient cloths. Hot water, you just have to have it. If you don't have it, let somebody go and buy a kettle and make sure or put a saucepan of water on a cooker that's available. I mentioned earlier on, always make sure your caterers or the organizers have enough refuse arrangements. Practice clean as you go. Clean as you go. In anything you do, go clean, clean, go. The other thing, suitable protective clothing. Now, a lot of people use their scarf, they had their head covering, they wear gloves. Protective clothing is not to protect you, it's to protect the food from you. We don't know where you've been before you've come to serve your food in a venue. So your suitable protective clothing, it's always nice to have light colored clothing as well, because the lighter it is, you'll see when it's dirty. Make sure you have suitable protective clothing and have plasters on board. Try and get wash-proof plasters. They always recommend, it's not a legal requirement, recommend blue plasters, because if blue plasters fall into food, we don't have any blue food. Remember the story I told you about the samosa? If it was a blue plaster, that would have been found in the samosa. I see Augustina has got her hand up.
I'll wait till the end. Sorry. Carry on.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So yes, washproof plasters. So have a due diligence checklist. As I said, I'm willing to work with the team so that everybody, all the schools can actually have something, and that will help you to make sure that you've done everything possible to work with the caterers so that you are all producing safe food. Next, please. Yes. Now, I put some case studies together, and Beatbox Catering Services is known to a close friend of the president of Methodist High School. Now, I'm an old GMG. I didn't want it to be Methodist Girls High School, but I thought I've got to get Methodist into it. The owner is known to cook the tastiest fried rice in town and works full-time as an accountant. She often cooks her well-known fried rice for family and friends, but never cooked for more than 40 people before. She cooks from her home, which she shares with 3 other members of the family. NSF want BBCs to cater for 30 people at an upcoming event. Can we use this caterer?
No.
Okay, why?
From what you've said, really, small box kitchen, other people in the house, cross-contamination, she's not satisfied. She only does it because she's a friend to a friend, and she's been recommended by a friend. She's not trained in all the things you've pointed out to us today.
Fantastic. Yeah, I wouldn't use that caterer. I wouldn't use that caterer for an event to be run by yourself. Yeah, she may have the tastiest fried rice. She's an accountant, so she's not stupid. She cooks well for family and friends, but she's never done for more than 40 people before. She cooks from her home. She's got other members of the family. How big is her kitchen? What are other members of their family? Does she have dogs? Does she have cats? Do they come in? Do they go out? Yeah, thank you. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. And I don't think you should. No matter how tasty her rice is, don't use her. Yes. Can I, the next slide, please. 300 people have bought tickets for an event organized by NSF. The event is planned to last for 4 hours with a 60-minute window for a lunch break. No hot food is to be served. The registered caterer arrives on site at 11:30 with a selection of prawn, egg mayonnaise and cheese sandwiches, cream cakes and fruit salad. Lunch is to be served at 12:15. The event was running behind schedule and failed to meet the 12:15 deadline. The new time allocated is now 14:45. What do you now do? Anybody? I'm sure we can all talk.
I won't be eating that, sorry.
You won't be eating, okay.
The The egg, the selection, certain foods can be dropped out from the menu, which would have already been contaminated, like the prawn, egg, mayonnaise, cheese, even the cream cakes. Really, might be maybe those ones would have gone off. We could check the temperature as you pointed out, and if it's below 8 degrees, then we can get rid of all that. And I think, I think that is what I'll.
Okay, I'm teasing you all. Bear in mind, you spend lots of money on this. You've got 300 people.
Well, shouldn't this be in the fridge as soon as she brings it in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if there's
we
a
don't
fridge
know
on site,
how it was transported, though.
Okay.
well, it depends on how she transported them. What if she transported them in a refrigerated little mini bag? Some of them come refrigerated, and it goes straight into the fridge when she arrives.
Yes.
Well, that's an option.
That's fine. Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
As long as they're not left out.
Yes.
So I think,
yeah,
if those procedures are followed, then it should be okay.
That's fine. That's fine. And then who says that they have to have lunch at 12:15? You're running late, and that's the importance of setting times. You know, when we say, thank God we all started at 7 o'clock, but as Africans, the sun always stops and we're always late. But it always affects, it's a horrible, it's a knock-on effect. You can actually bring, they can have a sitting lunch. They don't, the new time is now allocated to, it's 4:40. Somebody said, but why are you allocating it to 4:14? We won't have the lunch. Let us eat. The food is there. So you can actually do things. But the key thing is make sure that food is kept under refrigerated conditions. Because you've got the prawn, you've got the egg mayonnaise, you've got the cheese, you've got the cream. These are all what we call high-risk foods. So the key thing here is make sure the temperature of the food is kept chilled. And yes, she should have brought the food. Why am I referring to a woman? He should have brought the food in under refrigerated or cold conditions. Yes. The last case study. Okay, NSF again. Okay, King's Catering Services had been requested to provide a cold finger buffet for 150 NSF members. Breaded drumsticks were included on the menu. KCS had used an agency to hire staff for the day. One of the staff had been asked to plate up the chicken. She sensed a funny smell with the chicken and brings it to the attention of the manager of KCS, who tells her to get back to work because nothing was wrong with the chicken. She goes on to cut up 2 more drumsticks from different plates and notices one is properly cooked, but the other looked undercooked. Not happy with the response from the manager, she tells one of the organizers, "What would you do?"
We're not eating that.
Great.
We're not eating it.
Great.
We've been in it straight up.
Thank you. Definitely. Just bin it all. If one smells funny, one looks cooked, and one looks undercooked, how many more? How many more are you going to? It's what is it? Russian roulette. Let's try. Just spin it all. And unfortunately, they won't have chicken on that particular day. That's it. Thank you. And the next slide, please. Oh, I've given you some useful links. A lot of information is available on the Food Standards Agency's website. You'll find information for businesses. You'll find information for consumers. It's a government website. There's so much information there. And yeah, just use it. Just use it. And the last link. Be food safe. Everyone has a part to play. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay.
Right.
Is there a mod?
Sorry,
Can
if you ask questions, do you please do so by raising your hands and we'll call you one by one. First question will be asked by Augustina. I think she had her hand up. If you still have the question, do you want to ask up now? Augustina?
Yes, thank you. I must say thank you to the presenter. You've done very well. You've touched quite a lot of topics, really. We're grateful. I'm Augustina. I'm the president of LASOGA. We are currently hosting the quiz night. And because of the past experience, that is why we have to do all this food hygiene safety. And we really appreciate this. We thank NSF for putting this out for us. We don't have to be a caterer to all know this. We have all dropped our guards since after the COVID. And that is the problem we are facing now. However, one point, because we are hosting it, we're taking into account what you've pointed at. But who is going to do the temperature and everything? We will take that into consideration, what time the food will be delivered. On our ticket, we've put the time for the food to be served. But however, the issue we have is Nigerians, we don't keep to time. If we say we're serving food at a particular time and people don't turn up and all that thing, that is one thing. The other thing is that Nigerians, we want to eat a four with a rice, with all this, we put all this in our plates. However, some of us have ill health, like our immune systems are not working well, but most of us don't even know this. And this impacts on the health, the food they eat as well. It is for us to take that responsibility to be aware of our food, what we can eat and what we cannot eat. Because some spices used in different foods by different caterers impact on us as well. And you've pointed out that food poisoning does not happen instantly. However, we all have that responsibility to take care, be mindful of what we eat. And the hand hygiene issue is key to all this. So that is one. I'm sure there are many people on this call, and that is why I'm pointing this out. We don't want them to come and say, oh, when we went to last event, we are going to try our best to do all this with the support of NSF as well, because it is a high responsibility for us to meet all this now. And Nigerian caterers, as the first case you did, we know this person is a friend, he cooks very well, the food is very sweet, all that thing. And that is because we want to cut costs, we use friends for managing our food. We don't want to offend any person, so when we ask them, did you train for it? We just cut corners. So the key thing is, so for everyone here, that we will have to be very, very strict with everyone on that day. And we should all look out for ourselves as well. Take responsibility, be conscious of what we eat, and know what is good for our system, know our health system very well. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Augustina, I'm going to add something to that. You know, the allergens, I didn't touch on allergens. Yes. There are 14 allergens which are listed, and there's a list, you know, things like mustard and celery, and we've got milk and nuts. So there's a list of 14, and a lot of them are not used in African food. But I'm a I love healthy food. I love more food, but I'm extremely healthy. Sugar, I don't do. Salt, I don't do. Maggi cube, I don't do. Fried food, I use such a fish. That's a different thing for a different day, because then we start talking about, because a part of my job, I'm what we call a healthier catering coordinator. So I talk with businesses on how to make little changes to provide healthier food. So that is something else, totally different. Maybe I'll talk about that, if God willing, I'll talk about that another day. But yes, I hear your the time thing, and yeah.
Please, are you able to do this training for Nigerian caterers, even the ones that do it part-time?
We'll talk about it later on.
Okay.
Go through NSF. Go through NSF.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I step in?
Any other question?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, this is not a question, and this is to everyone. If you haven't dropped your email, please don't drop your email here. What you should do, please, send an email to info@nsf.community with your details in that email, and then you'll be replied with the certificate. Some of you that have dropped your email, please, it's all been deleted for, obvious reasons. Please follow these updates. Send your email and your name, as you would like to have it on the certificate, to that email, and then NSF will get back to you on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, GDPR. Yeah.
Right. Ayotola, I think, has her hand up. Do you want to go next?
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and good evening, Cindy Obosola. I'm sure as soon as she heard my name, she can look at the smile on her face.
Oh,
Thank you very much thank you very much for today's training session. Really useful. Some tips that we have indeed taken for granted over time. Well, the question I was going to ask, I think, was slightly touched on by, I don't know if it was Augustina that was asking if you could do the training for Nigerian, but I wasn't going to ask if you could do it for Nigerian. I was just going to ask if you could redo it for different alumni, and of course your alumni, my alumni, if this training could be brought to us, if it's possible, that could happen, because there's some very salient points and points that we actually take for granted that we probably don't think about, so I don't know if it's something, if indeed you would be able to, bring to different alumni, including mine and yours, as we have a connection.
As usual, Tola, anytime I see Tola, when I see Tola's phone, I thought, God, what does she want me? What is she going to do for me this? What's she going to squeeze out of me this time? Tola will talk. Next, please.
Okay. All right, then.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
Is gosh, I had somebody had BC. I didn't quite know who BC is. BC, do you want to go up?
Oh, thank you. My name is Bisi Ajilaura. Bosola knows me.
Bisi Ajila, oh my God. Hello, Bisi.
Actually, it's not to say, it's not a question. It's just to appreciate Bosola for this fantastic job you put together. God will bless you. Amen. And we will all learn through it.
Thank you so much.
I have one only question to ask about puff puff.
Yes.
Actually, I love puff puff, but I don't eat puff puff at any party. Even if they give it to me, I don't.
Okay.
Because I prefer puff puff. Puff puff is supposed to be served hot.
Yes.
At a sitting. But sometimes they do it and then they pack it in a plastic bag, and then they now give it to people. Afterwards, they said you can preheat. To preheat certain food, like you rightly said, some bacteria are susceptible to, prone to be multiplying, because they can multiply through any other condition of temperature. So that was why me, as a person, I don't go to that area. So perhaps maybe you can give us a little bit of a knowledge as regards to that.
I'll tell you something about puff puff. We have what we call high risk food and we have low risk food. Puff puff is full of flour, sugar, and water. So it's what we call a low risk food. The only thing, a lot of puff puff is an aerated product. So a lot of people's puff puff, and please don't crucify me, it's very stodgy and it absorbs a lot of oil. Now, Augustina talked about healthy food earlier on. One thing with reheating puff puff is that there's nothing wrong with reheating puff puff, and it's really just a preference, because it's already gone through the frying stage and you're reheating it, and it's just honestly sugar, so you don't have any problems in terms of any bacterial growth. You don't have any problems with that. The only thing is we have the bacillus bacteria which stays in flour, but to be honest, puff puff isn't a problem. Maybe chicken would have been more of a problem. So no, Bisi, you're all right with puff. You're all right with puff puff, yeah.
Thank you for that.
It's more of a taste, or what we call organoleptic. It may not taste, it may taste a bit rubbery, it may taste a bit stodgy on the outside and not nice inside, because when you microwave, the process of heating goes in a particular way from the outside in. So it doesn't get warm inside. So if you want to reheat puff puff, lower the power on your microwave. So you heat your puff puff by defrosting it. So then the heat will penetrate and you have an even distribution of heat, and then your puff comes out. But apart from that, no, there's no problem.
Right. Thanks so much. Augustina, you had your hand up again. Is that a fresh one, or you didn't put it down? Augustina, are you there?
This is an old hand. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Okay, great stuff. Bosola?
Thank you.
It's been absolutely amazing having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
An absolute whale of stuff today. I mean, a lot of stuff I didn't even know. I mean, it's, but yeah, I mean, not that I'm a good expert, but hey, for you bringing those things to light, I'm sure has been really, really enlightening. If I may just reiterate to everyone who's attended, please send your details via email to info@nsf.community, info@nsf.community, with your details and how you'd like your name to appear on the attendance certificate. It's been amazing having everybody here. Thank you so much for coming. And I hope we have opportunities to do this again in future. But thank